Good evening. I would like to call to order the Wyndham Raymond School District Board of Directors meeting for December 19th, 2018. We are in the Raymond Broadcast Modular. Mr. Prince?
Kate Brooks.
Here.
Eric Colby.
Here.
Jenny Cummins.
Here.
Don Dillon. Pete Hensler.
Here.
Anna Kenny.
Here.
Kate LeVay.
Here.
Scott McLean.
Here.
Okay. Are there any adjustments to the agenda?
All set.
Okay. Then let's have the Pledge of Allegiance. Yep. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I would like to entertain a motion to approve going into executive session.
I move to approve going into executive session to consider the possible expulsion of a student pursuant to 1 MRSA subsection 4056B.
It's been moved and
Second.
seconded. All those in favor? All those opposed? We're in executive session. I'd like a motion to exit out of executive session, please.
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved and favored. All those in favor? All those opposed? We're out of executive session. Okay. It is now time for us to vote on whether to expel a student. Mr. Prince was going to give us his recommendation.
My recommendation is to be expelled.
Okay. And our vote is that the student's actions were deliberately disobedient, that the removal of the student is necessary for the peace and usefulness of the school, that based on these facts, the board hereby expels the student effective immediately for an indefinite period of time or a time certain, and that the superintendent notifies the student and his parents of this action in writing with a copy of these written findings of fact and conclusion. If the student is expelled for an indefinite period of time, a reentry plan will be prepared by the superintendent in consultation with the student and his family. The student's parents or student have the right to request a readmission pursuant to law. Okay, so we now need a motion to expel the student. Could I have a motion? That was the motion. Okay, sorry. And second. All those in favor of expelling? All those opposed? Motion carries. Mr. Prince? We'll take a small recess so that, and we need to say good luck. So we're taking a small recess.
So
It costs so much. What's the difference between Title I and special ed? Talk about the needs of services. What is an IEP? What's least restrictive environment? And on and on and on. And as I was looking through all of that, I was thinking, well, I'm happy to offer a class. One would be a graduate level, what is special ed law, and the second one would be a graduate level special ed finance. So in the interest of time, what I've done is sort of highlighted in yellow the things that I thought, if we're doing special ed introduction 101, that would be a good place to start. And so, so we're going to really start with special ed law, and really sort of very generic version. You would not be able to pass the praxis based on this limited presentation. But that said, there are really 3 federal laws that have some impact on special education. Believe it or not, Every Student Succeeds Act, there's actually language in that protects students with disabilities. The main law that covers individuals with disabilities is the IDEA. So that's the primary federal law that we have to follow our guidance from, as well as the main law. And then the other one is the FERPA, and that really, for all of those of us in education, know that that's very similar to HIPAA in terms of the right to privacy. So there's some very specific language within FERPA that covers students with disabilities. So I thought we would start sort of with the IDEA, that actually for those of us, there are probably many people not born yet in 1975, but there's a lot of us who are. So this is not a new law. It's actually been around since 1975. And at that time it was called the Education for All Handicapped Children Act. So I feel very blessed that we've changed the name and we've come a long way, but the purposes are still the same. And so really the purpose of IDEA is to make sure that all children with disabilities have available the free and appropriate public education. And I'm going to spend some time talking a little bit more about that. But within that, we also have to prepare them, given their unique needs, for not only their education, but also employment and independent living. And folks don't always know that when we get to especially to the high school, and we start talking about post-secondary transition planning, there's actually part in your IEP that includes what are you going to do after school for work, and whether it's college or whatever, and then also how are you going to live? Are you going to live independently? And so that's important to know. It also makes sure that the rights of children with disabilities as well as their parents are protected. It's also intended to help states, local towns, education units, so school districts, and then the federal agencies provide education to all children with disabilities. And I'm not going to get into the funding piece, because I think originally when it was written, the intent was that the federal government would fund more of a larger percentage than it is. So unfortunately, over the course of time, the burden of most of the funding falls to local school districts. And there is some supplement from federal and state, but the majority does come from us. And then the last part is to assess and ensure the effectiveness that the programs that we're providing to students with disabilities are effective. And we work very closely with the Maine DOE in making sure that the programs we provide here in RSU 14 meet the standards that we need to do. Then there's not only the federal law, so IDEA, and there's also state law, and so there are 3 chapters under 20 that impact us. So there's the general provisions under Chapter 301. Chapter 303 is specific to children with disabilities, and there's Chapter 304, which is actually specific to the children who are deaf and hard of hearing. And then within that, there's also another law that we use every day, which is the Chapter 101, which is the main special education regulations, and that covers children from birth to 20. Right now in the state of Maine, the CDS is responsible for birth to 5. You may have heard that there's legislation looking at bringing the 3 to 5 to public schools. Part of that reasoning behind that is because Maine is the only state in the United States that doesn't cover children 3 to 5 currently. So that's on the horizon, which we'll talk a little bit more about as well. And the last link there is just the procedural safeguards, and I'm not going to click on it, but all parents who are currently receiving special education services know it's like a 96-page document that we shrink down to 24, but it is available online. It's available in multiple languages, but it's really intended to provide parents a very detailed expectation of what their rights are given their child with a disability. So what do all these laws mean for school districts? Well, the short answer is if you have a child with a disability, we are responsible for educating them, and so we don't get to choose. And so In addition to that, we have a duty of child find, which I'm going to talk about. We also have to ensure that children with disabilities have available to them, and it keeps coming up. So it's that free, appropriate public education, so FAPE, that emphasizes special education and related services. And so related services can be OT, PT, speech, social work, or behavior support, and that is to help them access their special education program. And then it's also designed to be individual to the student. And again, it goes back to that, not just the education, but the employment and independent living. We also have to look at providing the services regardless of the nature and severity of the child's disability. So I would say 95% of the time we're able to meet most needs of every child that walks into our district, but every once in a while we get thrown a little bit of a loop with a child that might have a unique disability or unique needs that we also have to do some research and find out, work with the families in terms of what's best and what programs are out there. But it is our duty under the law to meet the needs of that child or those children. So what is child find and eligibility? Really, child find is the requirement that the words we focus on are that we have to identify the children, we have to locate them, and then we have to evaluate them at public expense at no cost to the parents. And so while I said CDS currently covers the children 3 to 5, as soon as they turn 5, they're the responsibility of the public school. I put a note in there just so you guys can kind of have a frame of reference. So I work with Lori Whittemore, who's the director for Cumberland County CDS, pretty regularly. There are over 1,100 children as of December 1st in Cumberland County between the ages of 3 and 5 who are currently in the CDS system. And so, as some of you may know, the legislature looked at bringing that back to public schools last year. So it's been very difficult for CDS to not only keep employees, but then to also get new employees. And so for the first time in a while, we're seeing the effects of that. And so we have many students who were actually 5 this year who were never identified under CDS. We've had some children that we got the 5-year-old and we found out there's a 4-year-old sibling. We did the referral for CDS, but it's not likely that they're going to get evaluated before they come next fall. So it's not only are they not evaluated, then even if they are found eligible, they haven't get services. So we've got some kiddos coming in who were identified by CDS, but given lack of staff, they weren't able to find services. So I might have a 5-year-old coming in who never got speech services. And so 2 or 3 years of speech services are now coming in needing that additional time. So the piece about child find, so it's not just the kiddos that we know about from our existing families or families that reach out to us. We're also responsible for the homeschooled children. Parents can choose to send their children to private school. If they're resident of Raymond or Windham, they're still our responsibility. For example, Windham Christian School is located in Raymond, and we have students that attend there. That's our responsibility to evaluate those students. We're also responsible for homeless students. We don't have too many migrant families in our community, but we do have a number of homeless students. And then we also have obligation under students who have missed school, so kids that are considered truants. So we've worked with Jim Babcock, Dr. Babcock, our school psychologist, and developed actually an internal program for a flow chart for looking at eligibility for those students. And so it's not just the incoming kiddos, it's any child between the age of 5 and 20 that we're responsible for evaluating. We also, under Child Find, we are responsible for the first 30 days of a new school year. So if there's a child with a suspected disability, we have to make sure that we get that process started within the first 30 days. Or if the child is new to our district or we find out about them after school starts and they enroll in our district, we have, again, 30 days from the date where they enrolled in our school. So I'm just going to give you a quick Reader's Digest version, but essentially the process is that a referral would be made to special education, and that can either come from the parent. This would be like a whole board workshop, but we have lots of RTI teams, or those are the intervention teams within our school buildings, and so those teams will often make referrals to special ed as well. Teachers can make referrals if they want. We really like for them to go through the RTI process, but they are also able to make referrals. And then, so once we've got a referral made, I didn't print it here, but I did put the link, and so there's a new DOE special education form that was effective October 1. That's a optional form from the Department of Education, but you have it in your packet. So it's a 10-page referral packet of what they are looking for information from schools if we're going to do a referral for special education. It's a very thought out, very thorough form. It shows you, for folks who aren't in the trenches doing this, the work that goes into supporting students prior to them being referred to special education, especially if they're in our district. The really cool thing, I have to do a brag and a shout out, is Lisa Backman, who's our school psychologist that works at both primary school and Manchester, and then Ruth Crowell, who works out here in Jordan Small. They helped part of the NASP, so the main organization of school psychologists and the Department of Education, to develop that form. So we were pretty excited to be included that at the ground level. So the IEP team will come together and we will talk about what the concerns are. So our obligation is to not just throw the evaluation like menu at folks, but what are the concerns? Are they academic? Are they emotional? Are they functional? And then based on that conversation and our data and the analysis, we order evaluations. Parents sign those evaluations, and we have 45 school days to complete them. Then we come back together and we review the evaluations, and then there's a whole process for determining eligibility, and depending upon which category the team is considering, there's individual steps that need to happen for that. If the child is determined to be eligible, then the team at that time will develop an IEP that's specific to that child. And I know one of the things was to have me talk about what an IEP is, and so I think we're now, I brought a couple special ed teachers, so I want to make sure you have time to hear from them, but are we like 13, 14 pages into an IEP before we put any information in it? So for their folks, their students, we're seeing IEPs like 23 pages long because of the needs of the student. So that's a process. But that said, there are 13 categories, actually 14 if we count developmental delay. And developmental delay is one of those neurological disabilities that's sort of a category, and right now the only students that can be identified under that are 3 to 5 year olds, so it's typically been thought of as a CDS category, in part because they're still trying to figure out what the little kid's deal is, right? And so because of where we are with CDS, we're seeing more and more students coming in with still having that diagnosis or that disability category. What it does, how that impacts the school, is we have an obligation under Chapter 101, the special ed law, that by the time that child finishes kindergarten, we have to find a different category to put them under. So by the end of their first year, we have to have done additional evaluations to find out what exactly is going on, given one of the other categories. So there's lots of categories, and I'm later on in my presentation, I'm going to show you the numbers specific to RSU 14 so you can see how our kids fall within those categories. FAPE, we've talked about a little bit. So FAPE is, once the child meets eligibility criteria, our obligation is to then provide them with FAPE. And FAPE is that free, appropriate public education, and that goes back to free, right? So at no cost to the parents, no matter how much the program costs. And so that includes special education and related services without charge to the parents, and are within the boundaries of the individual IEP program. So even if Mr. Howell and I had the same disability and I needed something different, my IEP team has to say, what do I need as an individual student versus what Mr. Howell needs as an individual student. And so it really, even though we identify numbers of students within a category, our IEPs could look very different depending upon what the evaluations say and what we need. In addition to providing this free and appropriate education, we also have to do it in the least restrictive environment. So another special ed term, you might hear it sometimes referred to as LRE. So the thing about special ed is there's some really cool songs people have made, but we do the acronyms all the time. So IEP, FAPE, FAPE, LRE. So LRE is the least restrictive environment, and what that means is to the best of our ability, we have to provide students with disabilities opportunities to be educated with their non-disabled peers. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about what we do here in our district, but basically we have to have this continuum of services that at every opportunity possible to the benefit of the student, we have to provide them opportunities to be with their peers. Every once in a while, or some of the students, their disabilities or their needs are more severe so that they're not able to do that, but those are, again, on the continuum of services. So we're really looking at how that's done. That also ties in for those of you that do the budget. When I come and do my budget presentation, we divide it into three categories. So the special ed teachers, those children that are in the special education setting, more than 79% or more of their day, and then the resource room are those middle kiddos, and then the self-contained are the opposite, so less than 40%. And that's really how the Department of Education looks at it. In order to meet our obligation to provide this continuum of services and in the least restrictive environment, we do a really nice job here in both Windham and Raymond, and we really start with that regular education classroom first and looking at every opportunity for all students to be with their grade level peers, as well as in there, whether it's a house or a team or that sort of thing, whatever model the schools are using. And we provide special education services actually quite a bit in the regular ed setting. We're doing a lot of co-teaching, particularly at the high school level. That's been a really big benefit for us to be able to reduce the number of ed techs that are supporting kids and be able to provide direct instruction in the partnership between the regular ed teacher and the special ed teacher. But the co-taught doesn't just have to be with a special ed teacher. At the primary school, we're doing a lot of work with our speech therapists who are going into the classrooms and doing social skills lessons. And for kids, if you need social skills, you need typically developing peers to model, right? And so it's worked out really well. And actually, in fact, some of our special ed students are doing the modeling for the unidentified student because they've got the language and all that. So, so we do a lot of that partnership. We also do co-treating with the PT/OT, so we're minimizing the time that students are pulled out of their class if they do need those support services, and being able to work together. We also have the Katahdin program, and I think it's important for folks to know that that's one of our best opportunities to give kids with special ed services an option for least restrictive environments. So that is a regular education, alternative education program that does an amazing job for the students that we have in that program who have IEPs. We have special education resource rooms, K-12. We have self-contained classrooms, K-12. We have the life skills programs at the middle school level, high school level. They're referred to as bridges, and those are true, like often our athletes, our Special Olympic athletes, students who are participating in the Strive and different programs at the high school. At the high school, we also have a goals program to support students, mostly who meet criteria under emotional disturbance, but have those like internalizing anxiety, depression kind of thing, but need that more wraparound because the high school's pretty big. I'm proud to say after 4 years in the district, I finally can get around all the wings, and I don't have to go outside anymore to figure out where I am. So it can be overwhelming. We also, within our continuum, we have the special purpose private schools. So those are referred to as our out-of-district placements. They are probably the most expensive of services that we do offer. However, we are very respectful when we place students there in order to meet their needs that we're not able to do within the district. And then lastly, we provide tutoring, and we do that in a variety of settings. And it can be for medical reasons or disciplinary reasons. One of my favorite things that we're actually, we've had the benefit of partnering with the Barbara Bush Hospital the last few years, and I call them Sheldons. I don't know that's what they're really called, but we've had the opportunity to have students have Sheldons, and so they're great, and they're the little robots, and they come and they go to school, and the kids stay at home, and so that's how so for those of you that watch Big Bang Theory, Sheldon was so Sheldon was the germaphobe, right? And so that was super exciting. So we've actually used that a few times, and so it's been really it's great for the kids that are still at school, and it's great for the kids that are sick because they get to still be part of the experience. So and Barbara Bush is great. They've been great to work with. So now I'm going to sort of shift a little bit, knowing that was really broad, but I thought it would be helpful to just have a conversation about what's going on in RSU 14. And so I apologize for those of you at home, but essentially I think it's important to know that probably one of the biggest growing categories where we're starting to see, although the numbers here don't reflect a huge growth, but the number of students with autism. And so in 2014, when the year before I started, it was 41. We're up to 4950. And I'll show you a slide as we go on. Out of our incoming 51 students from CDS, we have 9 that are identified as coming in as autism. So our current percentage is like 1 in 10. The new group coming in is almost 2 in 10. That are under that autism umbrella. And so those are the students that, when we talk about needs, even within the spectrum, you can have kids that are very high functioning that, may need some adult support, some social skills, social work instruction. But then you have students who have, 120 minutes of speech, 60 minutes of OT, 60 minutes of PT, a one-to-one ed tech. And so there's the gamut even within these numbers. Again, the developmental delay is just that category that as we get through, by the end of kindergarten, they have to be somewhere else. I think what's telling is just sort of the state of our society these days. And so you can see there's a big increase from in the emotional disturbance category from 37 to 50. And those are students in that category who have been diagnosed with anxiety, have been diagnosed with depression, have been diagnosed with a whole host of emotional disorders that in one way or another shape their, or impact their, adversely impact their education. And it can be, for those students, they might be academically on grade level, but they need a whole different level of supports that fall under the functional umbrella, and it's our obligation to provide those services as well. I think, so hearing impairment is those students, sometimes they fall under speech language, but we have done a really nice job. There are a number of students in our district who have either cochlear implants or the FM systems who need no special education services at all and have 504 plans, but we do have some that get special education services. Intellectual disability, I don't like the word, but that previously, just to be transparent, from 1975 to now, that's the category that used to be MR, and so now it's we refer to those students as intellectual disability. Multiple disabilities, as you can see, that has been the biggest growth, and the state is actually addressing this because Maine is one of the highest in the country for this category. When a student gets placed in multiple, it's usually with under the direction of the school psychologist in our district, because we're very lucky to have them at most of our meetings. And what that means is the child qualifies for 2 or more disabilities if they were to be standalone. So if I use Mr. Howell as my special ed student, Mr. Howell is a student with ADHD and would qualify under other health impairment, but he's also got a learning disability in reading, and so he has that piece as well. And so the team is not able to flush out that they're concomital, so they're not able to flush out if you took away the ADHD, would he just be a learning disabled student? So the team makes the decision to put them under multiple. So that number is fairly high for the state, and our average is right on par with the state. So they're going to be looking to see if there's a different way that we should be interpreting that. But for now, we're getting kids what they need, and so in this particular case, kids need both. Other health impairment, again, you can see that's just been a steady incline, and those tend to be the students who have ADHD and or executive functioning deficits, and so those are the kids that I think in our district were really needing to do some work on K-12. I think if you look at the category underneath for learning disability, it kind of peaks and valleys, but you know, we're pretty even across the way, and this past year we were at 133. So I think we're doing a much better job of addressing kids through intervention for academics, so whether it's reading, writing, or math, but you can see the shift. It's just all that you know, initiating work. And so again, that would be a whole conversation about what that might look like. Our speech numbers have stayed pretty consistent, but you can see we've reduced over the years. TBI is traumatic brain injury, so we have those rarely. Typically, they result from a child being in an accident. More often than not, it might be a car accident, it might be a skiing accident, it might be something like that. And so we're providing, and so we get a medical diagnosis for that category. We don't have anybody with a visual impairment this year, so our total students this year, actually the last 3 years, has remained pretty constant. And so for us, it's the number of students that are graduating and moving in has remained constant. However, the needs of the students who are here are much more significant. But there's been a steady increase. The next page is where I just wanted to like set the stage. So if you look at where we were, and so this is this year's data as of October 1st, 2018. At Raymond Elementary, we had 36 students who were identified as receiving special education services out of the K-4 class. So that's 16% of their school population. For next year, we have 46 kids between the students that are already, well, it's the 39, so there's 3 kids that are in referral that are going to qualify, plus there's 7 Raymond residents that are coming in as kindergartners. Jordan Small they're in a fluctuate. This 5th grade class is huge, so, but the 8th grade class is small. So they're going up to the high school, which is a whole nother issue. And then we've got, so they're staying pretty same. Primary school, this is another school we're going to take a pretty significant increase. So we have 92 this year. We were anticipating 80 until we got the 44 incoming K students. So out of those 44 K students, 7 are still considered developmentally delayed. 8 of them are autistic. 21 of them are speech. We have 1 that's multiple with autism and hearing impairment. So these are complicated kids and just sheer volume. So you'll hear more about that as we go. I actually am in the process of gathering information from Cumberland County Group, but it's a little alarming when I reached out. I just had talked to folks on Friday, and I've since gotten emails where I'm creating a chart. And so Falmouth has 5 incoming CDS, Yarmouth has 10, Cumberland has 10, Westbrook has 28, Scarborough has 33, South Portland, which I expected to be higher than ours, only has 43. So we're the highest right now for Cumberland County, and we typically get, so this might be shocking, these guys don't know this yet, we typically get, this time of year we're usually at 25 to 30, and we typically get 10 more based on that 25 or 30. I'm a little frightened as to what that might look like down the road, but we'll manage it. Manchester is holding steady at 60. Wyndham Middle is holding steady. My second or third area, if you will, is the high school. So this 8th grade class, there are just from Wyndham Middle School 52 students coming over to the freshman class that have IEPs. Many of them under that other health impairment category. So we can manage 160 to 175 pretty consistently with the staff that we have, but it's going to be a scheduling nightmare for the freshmen. We just don't have enough kids graduating to offset that big number of 50 coming in. So we're looking, if the projections stay true, and that those numbers include kids that are in referral that we know will qualify, we're looking at 557. Another reason why we believe that the incoming K numbers are so high is in the past, students who had a birthday after October were eligible for 1 more year of CDS. Because there's really not the guarantee of the CDS services, we're seeing more of those kids. So 9 of those 51 are kids that stayed out last year but are coming this year, and we aren't seeing the ones that could stay out this year stay out. So that's kind of where we are right now. The other thing I thought it would just be helpful to have you guys see sort of a trend over the last few years. So our population of just number of students for has declined actually from 3,392 in 2014 to 3,118, but our special ed population has continued to rise. And so percentage-wise, we're at 16.5, which is a little bit below the state average of 18 last year. The state hasn't finished calculating the state average for this year yet, but we're anticipating it somewhere around 18. So we're below the state average, but still higher than what we as a district have been in the past. So I think it's helpful to know. It's always, a sort of a eye-opening thing when you start to look at what's adding to the costs of special ed, especially as we're in the budget season. I think I thought it would be helpful if I could just sort of list out some of the things, and we could get into more specifics when we get into the actual budget discussion. But essentially, it's the needs of the students receiving special ed services, and that's academic, emotional, behavior, and functional. And so you now know it's the law. We have to provide the service based on what the child needs, and so that cost can vary. And while we try to predict, numbers and all that sort of stuff, we do our best guess, but we don't always know about the move-ins or the kids that we didn't know there was a kindergartner and there's a middle school student, and then we find out, oh, they have a 4-year-old brother. Oh, who knew, right? So just those kinds of things that pop up. Other costs are the number of special ed staff needed to support those students, and that's why I brought the folks from primary school. So I want to make sure I leave them time to talk, because they are the poster children for us being able to keep children in district, but we're at maximum capacity. The number of school psychologists district-wide, we were able to increase that to 5 last year, but talking with Dr. Babcock, with 190 students in the school, and just thinking about how kids have to be evaluated every 3 years, the emotional needs of the students. So our school psychologists are being used more and more to help consult with the social workers and families, but just because of the emotional needs of the whole family group. We've used some contracted services to help meet IEP needs. We've got a great partnership with Hear Me Now, who comes in and helps me to manage all the FM systems. We work with a ton of audiologists, and in other districts that falls to the speech therapist, and so we just have such volume of service that we need to provide, so that's been a way for us to get the services. The physical space required, so you're going to hear Bill talk this year in the budget season. We're running out of space. We have seen an increase in the number of students who are attending our ESY program. We've also seen an increase in transportation costs, so when Mike's coming asking for vans, my fault, I'm sorry. So because if an IEP team determines that a child is unable to ride a bus that's directly related to their disability, we have to provide special transportation for them. And so that's where some of those come. And then the daily rates for students attending out-of-district placements, I have no control over, so that's set by the main DOE. So I did include for the board members the rate so you could see. So those are per day, the costs. And so for those of you that have them, we send students to CAD, which is the Center for Autism and Developmental Disorders. And so I'll just give you like some rough examples. So if you look on that sheet, I'll give you the current year. So for the Center of Autism, it costs $343 a day for us to send a child to that program, and that doesn't include transportation. We provide the transportation. We also send students to Margaret Murphy, and so Margaret Murphy is $251. We're fortunate. We have a good relationship with them. We have sent students from Raymond to the Auburn program, so they don't have to travel all the way to Saco, but we do send students from Wyndham to Saco. We also work with Spurwink, which is $277 a day, and we work with the Collaborative School and Sweetser. So those are the programs that we have had. For those of you that are familiar with Future Builders, they're $201, and we did have a student last year at Maplestone, which is down in Acton. So again, students are placed there by IEP teams. This is what I have for staff this year. So 28 teachers, 5 self-contained classrooms, 65 and a half ed techs. And I put that in perspective because when I was talking to Kat, who's the special ed director in South Portland today, they have over 100 ed techs for their 554 children. So I'm feeling better. We have special ed coaches that help in a whole bunch of different ways. And actually my special ed coach in Raymond has been a one-on-one ed tech for the last 2 weeks because we had a move-in student come from a day treatment program. 5 school psychologists, 4 speech therapists. I feel like 3 hummingbird, 3, how that song, and a partridge and a pear tree. And so we have 1 physical therapist, 1 behavior interventionist, an adaptive PE teacher. So Stacy is actually a regular gym teacher who we are very blessed to have her at adaptive phys ed, and so over the course of her week she sees all the students who have adaptive PE as part of their IEPs. And then the site coordinators, we currently have 5, but Lisa Kennerson is one of them, and she's actually a special ed coach, so it's not an additional position. She just does both duties. So I'm going to try to stop talking. So as I shared, we try to keep students in district as much as possible. For our students that are out of district, it's because typically we've tried, and then for whatever reason, mostly due to safety, so safety to the child and safety to staff, we've had to outplace. But I thought it would be really fun, and someone had requested that in their group as well. So I'm going to let Julie introduce everybody, but we have at Wyndham Primary 3 self-contained classrooms. There are 21 students between the 3 caseloads. There are 14 ed techs that are required to support those students. And then, so Jody and Julie and Jessica are the 3 teachers. And so I'm going to turn it over to them for just a minute. And they were going to just describe for you a day in the life of. And then if you have questions, you're certainly welcome to ask them questions. So come on up, Julie. Do you want to bring your ed tech?
That's this. Michelle. This is Michelle.
She's
one of our ed techs that works.
Michelle. So
she's down in the trenches.
She's in the trenches too. So this is Julie Files is one of our teachers, and Jody Calancho, and Michelle Jordan is one of our ed techs who's also a parent in the district. So you want to talk about what your day starts like and what it. So this was calm. This was taken after school today. Everything was clean. All the Kleenexes and everything diapers were wiped up. So it's spotless. Everything was back where it was supposed to be.
Yeah. So my room's on the left and Jody's room's on the right. We actually have mirror classrooms, and you can kind of see at the end of both slides, we have part of the wall open. So we basically co-teach. Our kids go back and forth. I have 6, you have 6. Yeah. They go back and forth. All of our kids in our rooms, except for maybe 1 or 2, have one-on-one support. And at this point, yeah. And our day starts 8:01 and it ends at 3:15. We have kids with us all day, every day. The ed techs are there due to their scheduling. Sometimes they come in at 8:15, sometimes they leave at 2:45, just depend to get to the 32.5 hours. So with that, we pick up all the extra slack. We're there all the time. We cover their lunches so ed techs can get their lunches. We cover, breaks, all those things. So a lot of times we're jumping in. We become the one-on-one with the students. Yep. Most days we eat lunch with our kids. We don't have a lunch period. We don't have a prep period. We don't get any of that stuff. This is a full-time job. We wrote it down just so you guys would know. Number of kids. We have, within the 12, we have 6 working on potty training, which means we're diapering, doing all those things, running programs. We have 2 with augmentative communication devices. We have 2 with very limited verbal, so they have to have a one-on-one with them wherever they go. We have 1 that's hearing impaired that has an ed tech / interpreter with her wherever she is in the building. So we are busy. I mean, every kid is doing some type of individualized programming, whether it's the ACE program, which is a computerized, very scripted, very structured program. It could be, like I said, it could be toileting, it could be rote counting, so each kid needs that one person to manage. Yeah. We have some very, severely disabled kids. We have some kids, like as Lisa mentioned, that are academically grade level, but their behaviors warrant the fact that they cannot be in the classroom at this time. Very explosive, table flipping, those types of things, so.
And you guys serve K through 3.
We have K
So
through.
all 3 programs are K through 3.
Yeah. And then the Jess's program, Jess isn't here tonight, but Jess's program is pretty much the same thing. She's just in a different location in the building.
I think the difference between her program and our 2 programs is her kiddos are focusing a lot more on academic needs, where our kiddos are focusing more on functional needs. We have the kiddos that really were focusing a lot on just being able to navigate around the building, to be able to, we have some kiddos that have trouble with walking. We have a kiddo with a feeding tube. So we do a lot of just functional life skills needs for these kiddos, which is a whole lot different than it has been in years past. It's a much higher needs group of kids.
Very much so.
Than we've seen.
But that said, you do take them swimming.
We take them swimming
yeah.
every other week. Yeah.
We have an awesome physical therapist.
Yes, we do.
and so tomorrow's swim day. It's my turn this
If you
week.
ever want to have fun, we go to swim at St. Joe's.
Yeah.
And especially if you're a male, we would love extra. We love extra males to come swimming with us.
And it's amazing to see the gains that the kids make from the beginning of the year to the end of the year. Usually they're petrified of the water and getting in and doing anything. And then by the end of the year, a lot of them are moving around the water themselves. So it's a really cool
yeah.
program to see.
The other thing I just want to also do a plug for Jody and Julie is the majority of students in their programs also qualify for special education services in the summer, so extended school year services. And these guys were gracious enough to last year they co-taught ESY,
Yes.
and
Wow.
so not having to bring in teachers that aren't familiar with the kids or their programs. And so typically we look at ESY as to prevent regression, but these guys are allowing us to just continuing the program for that additional 5 weeks. And so even though the kids have quite a bit of 4 weeks off or 3 weeks off in August, they pick right back up where they left off. So the classroom is the same, the routines are the same, the expectations are the same.
And that was huge this
That was
year
huge
because we
this
had
year.
a lot of the same ed techs with us this summer too. So we did a lot of carryover from the end of the school year to the summer to the beginning of the school year. So it was a smooth transition, where the year before wasn't so much a smooth transition because the kids had no familiar staff with them over the summer, which made it very, very difficult for them to start the school year. So that was definitely a plus. Yeah.
So do you guys have any questions for them at this time?
Wow, thank you. Cool to do.
We love it.
Yeah.
They are, like, if they leave, I'm retiring.
I do have a question. So you had mentioned that there's a lot of one-on-one in both classrooms. You said one of you has 6 and one of you has 8.
We
No, they
both have
have
6.
So
Six
Jessica
and six.
upstairs has
Jess.
8,
Yeah.
or 7,
24.
12 and 12, 8, to get us to 21, 12,
Yeah.
12. She's got 9.
Yeah.
Jess has
Right.
9.
So if
So,
I'm
go
doing
ahead.
my math right, there's about 26 people in the 2 rooms?
Not in our 2 rooms.
Yep.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so the difference is some of those, so they have, how many ed techs do you have in your, out of the 14, how many do you have? 9?
3. I can count because I can just look at the pictures. 1,
Yeah.
2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. We have 11 ed techs between our 2 rooms. So there's 11 ed techs in the 2 of us.
Okay. So I'm curious. I mean, so you 2 are the lead teachers for that room. How much of your day is spent kind of overseeing what the ed techs are doing?
Not a lot.
Okay.
A lot of our time is either, we have usually fail to
Yeah,
fills
let's just
every
go there,
single
right?
day.
So every day fail to fill. The other day there were 9 fail to fill
Yeah.
out of their program.
So we have,
Like
I don't
no
know
subs.
no subs.
So
No
people,
subs.
We can't get subs
right,
in our
people
rooms.
call out sick and there's no sub.
So we have to be with those students one-on-one all day long.
Bummer.
So
Yeah.
that's a lot of our
And then when-
days are spent doing.
And then when you have
doing
multiple kids that usually have a one-on-one and we have to double up or triple up, it makes for a very chaotic day
Yeah.
because their kids aren't getting their instructional needs met.
Got it.
And that's usually, especially this year.
Yeah,
So
this
the-
year's been hard.
So the intent would be, to answer your question, would be that Judy, Jody and Julie.
Yeah.
I'm just gonna name them both Judy, and it'll be all set. They oversee the education program, and they do. They work,
Yep.
they do the IEP meetings. So outside of their day, they're having IEP meetings before school, after school. They're doing all their special education paperwork outside of the school day. They are working with a behavior interventionist for those students that are on the ACE program. That's a program that was developed by the New England Center for Children. So for our students on the autism spectrum, we're using that program as a recommendation for them. But they also do a lot of the individualized programs in terms of directing the ed techs on
Yep.
where to go. The advantage is when kids need one-on-ones and we're able to provide them, it's great. But you've heard the disadvantages under law, we have to provide them with a 15-minute break and a 30-minute lunch. And so these guys actually end up moving between kids while the ed techs get their lunch and break. And so they're often out at recess duty because we're covering 4 grades. So kindergarten through 3rd grade, all on different schedules, in different houses. And so it can be. And then, as Julie mentioned, we have the drop-in behavior kids. So, if I'm flipping chairs in Mrs. Cummings' room, I can't stay there. So I've got to come down. And so now they drop what they're doing and they're addressing those kinds of things. So I would say they're very flexible.
Yeah.
Have to be.
Yep, we have to be.
Yeah. But, in terms of there's no extra people standing around. Chris and I did a walkthrough the other day, and Julie was actually delivering the instruction for a student that recently transitioned down from Raymond. And so, didn't skip a beat. Everybody was where they needed to be. He was working on his IEP goals. And so they're selling themselves short a little bit in terms of what they do. I am an experienced special ed teacher, and I'm not sure I could do what they do as seamlessly as they do it. It's so second nature to them because they've been doing it for so long. I might have a panic attack and say, who do I call? But they don't. So when that classroom is bustling, every single cubby, every single table, every single space has got a student and an adult working on it. And with the augmentative communication devices, those are, those require support in and of itself. Michelle, I don't know if the student you work with has one, but they're using them to program the speech because the child doesn't verbal talk. And so being able to teaching that child the language on that board, so working with a speech therapist, working with the social workers, everybody's in that room all the time, I would say.
Right, so there's 3 individual kind of study carrels in each room that kind of all piggyback each other, but we call it the mat jungle, but those are basically exercise mats that we use to block off and give kids privacy, kind of a distraction-free area. And it works, it helps to narrow off the doorways. On my side, the kidney-shaped table, I have a student that works there, usually with me because he's paired with somebody else and the ed tech may be in the classroom. He's unable to be in the classroom, so 9 times out of 10 it's me that's delivering his instruction. And then what you don't see is 2 other tables off to the side where there's other kids working. So besides just the individual little areas, we have open tables where kids, and that's why we have all the mats and stuff to kind of wall off the room.
Right, and so even though there are 11 one-on-ones within that program, again, keeping in mind the 4 grades, if, I'm going to make this up, if Chris is a teacher and his class goes to art at 9:50 in grade 1, that ed tech and that child are going to art at 1:50. Sandy's in grade 2 and he's got a different special, that ed tech is going with that special. And so those kids always go, and so whoever's left behind, is working either under their supervision or with them directly.
Right.
So, and then if other people call out sick, they start to pull from our pool, and then these guys, our staff might not be out sick, but then they pull from these guys, and so they're now managing small groups of 2 and 3 students that their staff is there, but they need support somewhere else. So, yeah, it's a big puzzle every day. We look to see what ASAP says, and then we say, oh, we can do today.
Luckily, we have a wonderful group of ed techs, so if somebody is going to be out, they normally will text one of us so that we have a heads up. So when we get there, we're prepared and we kind of get the day going so that we know and can do that. And and everyone pitches in, like everyone helps out, however is needed, to help out on those days when we are really short.
We're there usually by 7:10 every day,
Yeah.
even though we don't have to be there till 7:45.
Yeah.
Right, because they get the kids off the bus, the van, so most of these kids are coming on vans, so
Yeah.
Michelle can attest they are meeting the vans at the curb.
8 o'clock.
They're getting the children, they're bringing them in, and gosh forbid you make that van 5 minutes late because Mike Kelly calls. Got somewhere else to be, come get your child, right? And then the same thing on the other end, right? So getting them out to the van to make sure that we can keep those
Flowing.
Yeah, the back.
right. But if they're late, it's okay.
Yeah.
But yeah, so.
No, very impressive, and thank you that you take it so seriously, that's awesome.
All right.
They are our kids.
Yeah, they are our
Yeah,
kids.
they're very protective of them, but
Yes,
all right.
yes,
And
they are.
anybody is more than welcome to come
Yes.
spend a day with us, spend an hour with us. We
Yeah.
would love to have you visit and
Absolutely.
kind of see it, because it's a different world.
Yeah.
All right, thank you guys, thank you very much.
Scott has one more question.
Oh, yeah,
Well, actually, I have a ton of questions, but I
Okay.
don't have
right,
time.
yeah, so, go ahead.
Okay. So with the with the potential addition of an extra 43 kids coming on, what are we looking at? More special ed teachers and a ton more level 3 ed techs?
Possibly.
How is that going to? Okay, maybe I'm getting ahead.
You are, and so, one of the very top thing on my future topics is how I get my budget, and it's quite a process.
Got it. Sorry.
So I would be happy to do a budget workshop with you if you want to talk about special ed and how we get there. Basically, what I do from this point is I meet with my site coordinators and we spend a whole day, and we start with students first. What are student needs? What do we have to provide? What do I have to get to meet IEPs? And then we look to see what do we have for staff, what do we have for positions sometimes, so not necessarily like special ed teachers or school psychologists who can help do that, and it's really a team effort. And so prior to that big meeting, I meet with the OT, I meet with the PT, I meet with the speech. Part of what drives our numbers is law. So special ed case managers in a self-contained, they can have 6 students, and with ed tech, each ed tech, you can have 5 more students, so it's very driven by the law. The same thing with resource room. You can't have more than like 25 students on a caseload and have it be manageable. Speech therapists, same thing. So their caseloads are driven by law. So we try to be respectful that they have paperwork, they have IEP meetings, which is a whole nother issue. But it's going to be a process. We've met with Bill, we being Chris and Kyle and Marissa and I, Marissa's the site coordinator. We're at maximum capacity, right? So right now, what we've been able to do, these guys have been great, is as students in Raymond Elementary needed support, we've moved them to Wyndham and been able to provide their services. Well, we've hit the tipping point, and so we're going to have to really talk creatively about what do we do with all these students. So out of those 44 students, 36 of them have speech services of 60 to 120 minutes a week, and that's a case manager right there. So we're going to have to work collaboratively as an administrative team to figure out what to do. The other thing that I will say is that Marissa's a bulldog when she goes to CDS meetings, I have to say that. And so we do a really nice job of going, and we spend time to get to know the kids before they ever steps foot into Wyndham or Raymond. We go and observe them in their environment, we talk to their case managers, we get to know their families, and then we really feel like by the time we come to do those transition meetings for when they come from CDS to us, we can talk to them about our continuum of services, and in some cases they still need a one-on-one. I will tell you there are some students on that list that are medically fragile who are going to need some support. 3 of those students actually have one-on-one nursing. So, we've already had the nurse reach out to those families and start to see if we can do it in a different way. So we're going to try to be creative, being respectful of the taxpayers, the staff. I mean, we're at, like we said, I call it the tipping point. You can't put too many more adults in there before you really can't hear yourself think, right? So to answer your question, Scott, hopefully between now and when we come to present our budgets, I'll be able to give you some very specific answers to your questions. But at any point, I'm happy to sit down and talk with you individually. Some other topics that, I thought about, thank you ladies, would be, just the referral questions, evaluations, if you guys want to get in the weeds of that. Just the whole IEP process. I think some of you are familiar with how that works, but, it's an IEP meeting can run between an hour and 2 hours. I was at one at Manchester last night until 5:45, so, you don't leave until the team comes to consensus or you agree to disagree. I talked to you about the CDS, but those proposed changes, one of the things they're looking at, and it'll depend on our new governor and our new legislature and where things are going, but one of the things that they are considering is bringing the 5-year-olds to the public school system for the 1920 school year. So in June of 2020, we would be responsible for evaluating any 5-year-olds. I'd love to come and talk more about the role of special ed staff and what they do across the district. So talking about like an ed tech versus a special ed teacher and what they provide for services. I'm happy to come and talk about special ed versus Section 504 because we didn't talk about that. We have a whole nother population of students who get 504 services. I know there were some questions about what's the difference between special ed, RTI, and Title I. And then just the paperwork itself mandated by law. So we are under DOE audit this year, or DOE monitor. We did a really nice job in our desk audit. We've gotten the results back from that. There's just a couple things, small things we need to fix and some wording in a couple of our policies that I'll work with Kate on. There's just been some updated law and we didn't update our policies, so no big deal. But they'll be coming in March to do an audit of our files. So we'll get a sense. But overall, I think we're in, there's some room for improvement, but we're in a really good space. And, considering most of my teachers do most of their paperwork outside of the school day, I think that's something we need to consider as well. So anyway, well, it's been my pleasure to come and talk with you tonight. I hope I was able to sort of give you a framework and answered what you were looking for, at least to start. But I'm also happy to come back if you need or meet with you guys in small group or whatever would work. So
I really appreciate the way you said to start. To give us, because this is
it's a lot of information.
It's a lot of information,
right.
And we need to have it. I mean, it's very important. For our understanding, especially of budget building. And I think there's a couple things that are sort of on the horizon if you want to Google to look at information. So I had sent to Sandy and Chris and our admin team and some special ed folks. It's the opiate epidemic in the state of Maine. The Bangor Daily News just did an article on Waterville, Maine, Augusta, Maine is the highest rate of babies in New England. And so I think there were 393 babies born a month with opiate addiction. And these are babies that are born crying, and they end up having to give them methadone within 24 hours to calm them down. And neurologically, they've been subjected to that their entire development. And so that we're all worried about what that's going to look like. The other thing is just the impact of screen time. So, we're now seeing the generation of kids in, upper elementary, middle school who know nothing but iPhones and have been swiping. And I was having a conversation with one of the OTs, and so we talk about handwriting, we talk about fine motor development. Kids don't play in shaving cream anymore. Everybody's swiping, and so just all that, what all that screen time is doing to kids neurologically before they ever even arrive at school. So I think the face of special education is going to be changing a little bit. I jokingly said to Sandy the other day, I said, why don't we just teach every class like it's special ed, and then we'll pull out the gifted kids. But no, I'm just teasing. But no, I think it really is changing, and I appreciate your support. We're very lucky. Marissa was joking the other day, we do have a great reputation of providing quality service here in RSU 14 for students with services, and I look at these guys, they're smiling, but they're part of the reason why that we're able to do that. So anyway, it's all good. Thank you,
all right.
Lisa.
You're
Thanks
welcome.
very much, and thank all of you for coming.
All right, so
really appreciate
One
it.
more question.
Scott has one more question.
Sure.
Just one more.
Sure.
So in order to start the services, you said the first step is referral?
To determine if they're eligible.
Right.
So
and that's this application right here?
yes.
Okay. Who fills this out?
So
Because this looks intimidating.
yes. So if it's a parent referral, it's as simple as writing a letter to Ms. Garno or, you know, the site coordinator at the building, I suspect my child might have a disability, I'd like to have a conversation about it. And so then we would call an IEP meeting within 10 school days and have a conversation about what the child's needs are. That referral form is really generated by our school staff. Even if it was a parent referral, we would work on filling that out. And so right now, we actually have all that data, even though it might not be on that form, but we actually do. So
Okay.
because they used our form as a model. So we have that data on any child in RTI right now, actually.
Okay. All right. And then, so because we're filling it out, we actually pay for it because we're obligated to by law.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
All right.
Yes.
And let me just say that I think that you guys have a tremendously hard job. I very much appreciate what you do. And I really want to thank you for coming in here and talking with us, because the special education budget is a huge piece of our budget. So I absolutely agree that this is just raising the iceberg, and there is so much more underneath the surface that you haven't even begun to discuss. So thank you very much, and I would absolutely love the opportunity to learn a lot more about this.
I have to leave this for Mr. Karen.
I have to say, just the paperwork alone is an education that everybody up here needs.
Yep.
So, do you have something you wanted to add, Lisa?
No, I'm all set. I'm just going to share my dongle with Mr. Karen so he can present to you.
It's good to share.
Very good to
So
share.
just so the running joke is like, it's hard to come by a dongle. So I said, my name's on it. Please bring it back.
It was on there.
You should carve a Mr. Potato Head in it, and then we'd always know.
So I have to tell you, for those of you who don't know, I collect Mr. Potato Head. Christine got me a Mr. Potato Head Christmas ornament.
Oh, there you go. There you go. Thank you very much. Thanks, everyone. Okay. And we are now ready for Mr. Karen to come and talk to us about the Wyndham High School accreditation report. Using a borrowed dongle.
Are you sticking around, Lisa, or do you want him to give you a $10 deposit?
No, I'm trusting Mr.
I will make sure that it makes it back.
I think you can
Not,
like
I'll
take
buy
his
another
ID
one.
and hold it and put it in the back.
Yeah, probably $10 wouldn't cover it, would it?
No, not for one of those.
So I'm Ryan Karen, principal at the high school. I'm happy to be here to talk a little bit about the accreditation report. Hopefully everybody got a copy of the full report sent out. So I just talk a little bit about accreditation, a little bit about where we're at, and then maybe answer some questions if people have any questions about.
May I interrupt you for just a second?
Sure thing.
Would you tilt the microphone up?
How's that?
Thank you.
All right. So the meaning of accreditation, Accreditation Public Schools by the New England Association for Schools and Colleges, which is NEASC. When we talk about NEASC, signifies that we've met the standard of accreditation, and we're committed to maintaining those standards and improving our educational programming by implementing the recommendations that come out of the visit. So there's a visit every 10 years. They provide recommendations, and we need to continue to work at those recommendations while meeting a certain standard. Continued accreditation is dependent upon our school demonstrating the ongoing reflective process moving forward. So a lot of people believe that a lot of people would like to think that we're at the end of the 10-year cycle. We had, I've been pretty lucky, or perfect timing. I've stepped in, this is the third time I've stepped in to a principalship right after the 10-year visit. So Chris hosted the 10-year visit last year. A lot of people would feel like that's the end of the cycle. We've gone through this, we've had the visit, we've had people in our schools, and the report being the end. It really isn't. The 10-year visit is kind of the middle of the cycle. And then we take the report that they gave us, that you saw, and then we use that for 5 years to work on the recommendations and continue to report to the commission what we're doing on those recommendations to continue the improvement cycle. And then we kind of start a new cycle 5 years later where we start a new self-reflection and preparing for the next round. So we very recently received the report. You've been able to take a look at the report. In June, we got a letter before we got the report that let us know that we've been awarded continued accreditation by NEAS for moving forward with no stipulations. So when they give us that letter following the meeting, they can give you the best news, like we got no stipulations, we're continue to be an accredited school. They can put you on warning. They can require special reports, a 6-month report. I was at a school once where we need to do a 6-month report, sometimes special reports on specific things. We didn't receive any of those. So we are in the normal accreditation cycle. We continue to do what we're doing, be reflective, be thoughtful in our process, and we move forward. So that's great news. It speaks a lot to the work that the board's done, central office, the staff at the high school, Chris, over the past 10 years. So we're at a really, really good spot. So when you look through take some time to look through the report, you'll see the way that it's structured. There's a summary of achievement on each of the 7 standards. So there's a standard on vision, there's a standard on curriculum, there's a standard on instruction, assessment, leadership, community, school resources for learning. That would be your nurses and your special education staff, resources that aren't directly related to instruction within the school, and then community resources, which would be the building and transportation and access to different programming. So there's a written summary on how we did on all of those 7 standards, 53 specific indicators within those standards. So you can take a look at all of those. It gives a narrative of both where the self-study felt that the school was, and also what the visiting committee, how the visiting committee felt we were doing. There's also 54 commendations on the good work that is being done. That's great. So it tells us under each standard, these are the things that we really like that you're doing. So when I went through and I looked as I was preparing for this school year to say, what are some of the common themes? What are the good things that neutral third party saw at the high school? There was common themes are student-centered and teachers as professionals. So you'll see that if you take some time to look through the commendations, there's that theme that runs through that. Our curriculum is student-centered, our instruction is student-centered. We spend time making sure that all students, just like Lisa's presentation there, there's specific students have specific needs, and we take the time to make sure that those needs are filled. And then there's also a lot of commendations around teachers as professionals, that we provide teachers with professional development. We provide teachers with a schedule that allows them to collaborate and so on. So those are some themes that run through that. In addition to the commendations, we received 29 recommendations for improvement. That's typical. It's not atypical to have 40, 50, 60 recommendations. So when I saw 29, I called Chris right off. 29 recommendations. We're in great shape. This is, and they really fit in with the work that the district is already doing. So I think we're set up to do some really good things with support of this report to kind of back up the things that we're doing. But those 29 recommendations are, I think I shared those with you.
Yeah, they're in the packet.
They're in the packet.
Yeah.
So you've got, that's pretty small. You've got 29, and they're broken out by standards, and they're also highlighted. I've highlighted certain standards. So that is the next part of that. I should not have mirrored.
I like the way that you put them, you colored them differently.
So
for,
so that's the work that we're doing now. Click exit.
May I just ask a general question? When
Sure.
you get it together there.
Yep.
I probably should know the answer to this, but in reading through all of this jazz, there's a constant reference to the 21st century learning expectations, and I'm not exactly sure what that means.
So in Maine and in Wyndham, we've adopted the guiding principles from the learning results as our 21st century.
All right.
So they're those skills that are taught and assessed across time. So are you a practical problem solver? Are you a good communicator? Are you an involved citizen?
Involved learner, right?
Just a
Involved
And
different way of
just,
saying
if
it.
I can just follow up on that, if you remember, much of our work over the last couple of years was developing our graduation standards, developing our performance indicators to those standards. Our next piece of work at the high school, which Ryan has then taken on, is how does that all now align to the guiding principles, and how does that make that connection? And that was a piece in our work, and when we did our self-study, we identified that we hadn't made those connections across all classes to guiding principles, and said that was a piece of work that we needed to do and wanted to do. And so one thing Ryan didn't recommend, or didn't say in the recommendation, is that about 90% of those recommendations are recommendations that were actually made by our staff to the visiting committee, saying this is the stuff that we know we need to work on, and this is our next step as far as the work that we're going to be completing. So there really wasn't anything that appeared in the recommendations that we hadn't identified ourselves as we need to work on this and we want to work on this.
Thank you.
So you've got the copy. So they'll give you, we have the 29, out of those 29, there's 10 highlighted, and the highlighted, so the system is, we have to give, I have to give a 2-year progress report to the commission, to NEASC, and I have to address the 10 highlighted, and some schools would have 15, 20, but at least the 10 highlighted in the 2-year report. So these are the things we're working on, that we're currently working on. I think we'll probably address 19 to 22 by the 2-year report, and then we have to finish the rest by the 5-year report. So we're in really good shape. We had a follow-up seminar that I attended up at Mount Ararat to go through this. It's mandatory, you have to go. And then we started right off. So I've developed an action plan. In the action, I'll show the action plan, but it'll probably screw up my... In the action plan, you can see here, and I'll share this whole, I put this together this afternoon, I'll share the whole slideshow with you with all the links. So in the action plan, you've got the things that we're doing, the action steps that we're doing, and then I've created a column where we've linked to the highlighted standards. So this action step is going to be used to address this. The full faculty, the leadership team helped me develop this over the summer in the first month of school. The full faculty voted to accept this action plan as kind of to guide our work. So everything that we're doing is we can show how it ties to addressing these topics. So 2-year report and then a 5-year report, and then we fall back into the new cycle. And the new cycle, just when we get really good at what we're doing, the new cycle they've given us new standards to look at. So we'll be jumping into a new set of, here we go. Every time I go into a linked is when we have problems. So starting with schools that are visiting this year. So I spent, before coming to Wyndham, South Portland's going into an accreditation visit. I just happened to leave right before their visit. But they're going into a visit in 2019, and they'll be using the new standards. So I had started the process of a self-study with the new standards, and then I jumped back into making action plans on the standards that I'm actually more familiar with. So that was kind of nice. But moving forward, after we worked through a series of action plans to address the 29 recommendations and kind of move us in the direction that we're heading. We'll move to, instead of 52 indicators, there'll be 32 principles. The new principles focus on what instead of how. There was a lot of feedback that the old standards were really prescriptive. You need to have this, you need to have that. When now the new principles are focused more on how are you going to get students from A to Z, and not you need to do these specific things. So they're actually more user-friendly, and they fit in very well with the things that we're doing. There's an introduction of the growth mindset, which we already talk about a lot in district, in some of our different curriculum. And then there's a focus, it's kind of, I don't know if it was planned, but it works very well. Student health and well-being, there's a real kind of shift on making sure that all students, IEP students, 504 students, are getting that whole wraparound support that we know is necessary in schools now. So we'll be moving to looking at the new standards in 4 or 5 years and preparing for another visit down the road. So that's where, in a nutshell, we're in a really good spot.
So we've got you for,
board member that thinks we need to.
I plan to be here. I plan to be here. Any questions on?
I do. Going through the survey, or going through this, I was interested in what the Endicott survey was and the results of that. Did you have that?
So the Endicott survey is a survey that staff take, student take, and community members take. Unfortunately, the number of students, the number of community members that participated in the Endicott survey was pretty low. So even the visiting committee shared that some of the connections that they have to make based on the data are kind of they might have question about, because we didn't have a high turnout as far as community members taking the survey on their thoughts about the school. And you'll see that in the recommendations that we need to work to strengthen the school and community connections.
So where can we get a copy of the Endicott survey?
It will I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
No, you go ahead. This is your.
So I've got the questions, and I have a copy. We receive a paper copy of the results, and then so I have a copy I can share with people if they'd like it. It's one of many data points that they use to put their report together. So I do have a copy. I don't know if we posted in district.
And that actually will be part of the final accreditation report when the binders are put together with all the feedback pieces, the results from the Endicott. And Ryan's correct. We sent that survey out to a couple thousand people in the community, and we had 16 returns on it. So it was hard to make trends and things from it.
Wow. It just was consistently referenced in all the recommendations, or many of the recommendations. So I was interested in what it reflected. And I would like to see a copy of it, and whether that's at at the end when you're ready to put it all together is fine. But I really am interested in it.
There are 16 people out there who really like Windham High School. The results from the parent one were really, really good. However, it was a very small.
No, but I'm interested in the student part and the teacher part, the staff part. So
I can get that for you.
Thanks.
Yep.
Anybody else have any questions? Or Kate, did you have some more questions?
The one that actually wasn't highlighted, it's on page 67. This
Of 106.
thing. I'm curious about the piece of the evaluation and supervision that was spoken. It's one of the things I believe, it's not highlighted, but it's listed.
Yep.
And I'm just interested in learning more about that, because when they say teachers reported inconsistency, and I don't need to know it tonight.
But I can look into that. I can talk to Chris to see where that might have. So we're looking to establish and implement an evaluation model that provides meaningful feedback. Is that the?
Yeah.
So I can definitely get some more information on that.
That'd be great. Thank you.
I just can give you a quick answer that might actually save a little bit. I think part of what came out is that given the size of the high school staff and the few number of people who evaluate, what teachers would like to have for individual feedback and for frequency of individual feedback isn't necessarily realistic given the number of people that you have participating. So for instance, my last year when I'm in high school, I had 38 people that I evaluated. It's very difficult to give all 38 people some very meaningful one-on-one feedback that they deserve. So
with the new hires, I've got over 40 on my list for this year, so I'm trying to balance time with new teachers and So that does make it tricky.
Is there any future discussion on how we can assist or make that better? Because evaluation is key for me, and feedback to staff, I'm sure, is very important as well.
The Supervision Evaluation Committee actually has that as an item they're taking up this year, looking at our standards and looking at the manageability of our system to make sure that we can do those things. But Wyndham High School has a staff of 125 people between ed techs and teachers, and we would love to be able to do it. It has been a physical impossibility with our current system.
I understand that piece. I just, and I know you're thinking about it, but hopefully we can come up with a process where everybody's happy. I don't know if that's possible, but that more feedback can be given so that instruction can be improved.
And often in those situations, principals are spending most of their time with the individuals who need the greatest amount of feedback. But what it does do is it does leave a little bit of a void for those people or the individuals who are high performing and would like to have more, but given time constraints. So,
and when I hear that you've got 40, I mean, that's a lot.
Yep. We're a big school. We have a lot of staff, and we have a comprehensive system where there's we spend a lot of time with the teachers. So mapping that out can be a little bit tricky. And like Chris said, we spend the lion's share of the time providing time and feedback for teachers who need a little bit more support, and then so there's not necessarily the equity and responsiveness for some teachers that may not need the same amount of support, but would still appreciate the feedback.
Sure. Perfect. I know you're on it. Thank you. Almost there.
Okay, are we all set? Okay. Thank you. And now we'd like to have Ryan Karen, the principal at Wyndham High School, talk to us about high school course offerings.
So I gave you the draft of what we're looking to do. Really the three classes that were new classes that we're looking to offer. AP Computer Science Principles, which would be an additional AP class. It is it's a course which follows code.org's curriculum, and it would introduce some real coding into the high school. So I'm pretty excited about it. I've seen the curriculum. There's a training for the staff member that's provided by code.org, so we don't, there's not an additional cost there. We have a staff member who is able to teach the class and prepared and ready to roll. So it would be a 1-credit class, an elective class. The only prerequisites would be completion of Algebra 1 and Geometry. So it would be open to most juniors and seniors that were interested in getting into some coding. Additionally, we'd like to offer a half credit of engineering and design, which is kind of a wraparound course that would be working on those 21st century skills, working on teamwork, working on being able to solve a problem creatively, and figuring out different ways to use different tools. And we would do some 3D printing, some 2D printing. We are currently exploring creating a significant makerspace, probably in the library or in the back of the library, where where students have an opportunity to just work on some things and put some things together, maybe some screen printing, a lot of different things. So that would be kind of a open the door to many things type of class, engineering and design. And then we'd like to offer a robotics class. We were lucky enough to hire Michelle Lane this year, and so she's teaching, she's taught robotics before. She was part of a good robotics club. In her last school, she's got a lot of background. This year, based on when she was hired and the budget, she's teaching a couple of Intro to Computers 1, Intro to Computers 2, and then she's providing capstone support for our students this year. As we move forward, we'd like to have her working in these technology courses. The robotics class, they use their robotics kits. We've already been able to get our hands on several kits through grants. And so we're playing with those a little bit this year. Michelle and I and a couple of students are going to talk about maybe some independent studies for second semester this year, so she can really get her hands on the robots and see what things we might be able to do moving forward for next year. And then based on how things go and based on budgeting, we could even look at an advanced robotics class which would be kind of setting you up for the robotics teams. I'm not sure if you've seen the robotics teams who compete. Those are larger scale robots that are made for competitions and things like that. She's got a background in that. I'd love to bring that. South Portland had a wonderful robotics program. We sent kids to the nationals all 5 years that I was down there, and it was 30, 40, 50 kids involved in the program, and we've got a teacher who I believe can bring that. So maybe advanced robotics next year, maybe the following year, but definitely the AP computer principles, which would get some coding, which would be necessary for a robotics program like that, the engineering and design, which would help with the construction aspect, and then the robotics class. And I think there's an interest at the school as well. Any questions about those? Yes.
Yeah, and actually, anytime that we have new course offerings, we always ask, is it additional courses, or is it replacing something? Are we going to be losing some courses?
These are additional courses. So we were, they're going to replace capstone support that we put in this year in the first year of the capstone. So Michelle was hired. She's a new employee this year. She's a technology teacher. So we have her teaching a couple of technology classes and capstone support this year. And then we'd like to build a program from there. Years ago, we had more technology in the high school, and that kind of phased out. And more traditional woodshop technology classes, we'd like to phase in some more of the coding and the robotics line of things.
Yeah, these sound great.
Yep.
Just a question that kind of dovetails to the previous discussion. There was some citation in the report about scheduling and the difficulty. Some classes might be 25 and then a class that was 8 or something like that. Is that common?
We are trying to balance schedule and student choice. So we offer such an array of student choice that it makes our scheduling and our class sizes difficult.
Right.
So if we offered, let's say in English, if we offered English 11, then we would have an honors level and an academic college prep level, and we could balance classes pretty well. We offer choice classes at the college prep level, so they're semester long, specific to different themes to get kids excited about what they're studying. But you might have a bunch of kids interested in one section and then not as many in another, and we build our schedule based on student request, so that makes it a little bit harder to have balanced class size. So we don't have the balance that you might see in a school that is heterogeneously mixed classes. If you went to a Noble High School where they have a lot less levels of classes and a lot less, maybe they don't have the honors option, they move straight to AP, they've got pretty consistent class size because everybody's together. Where we've got a lot of different choice. We've got the difficulty, I'm sure you've heard, of paths, the voc programs in both the morning and the afternoon. Right. So we have to have 2 kind of mini schedules in one so that kids don't miss their afternoon. So we have a number of scheduling challenges, some that are self-inflicted and some that are just part of the situation we're in with the 2 voc schools and such. But it is common to have bigger classes and smaller classes. We try to keep everybody within the board's recommended class sizes, and it's the balance between what we think is philosophically what we feel is best for students in terms of choice as opposed to numbers, class numbers. Does that make sense?
Yep, it does. Thanks.
Any other questions about those technology classes? In addition to that, I just added it in today as a maybe we're working on it. I'm trying to make an articulation agreement with USM. They would like to, for next year, work with us to have a college writing semester-long class for seniors. It would be a congruent enrollment class, so it would be contingent upon us finding a teacher within our system that had the qualifications, so they'd have to have a master's degree in English, probably, in English Comp. But students that took that class, if we got the articulation agreement together, would fulfill the composition portion of first year English at both the university and the community college system, and they'd earn a half a credit of English for us. So it would be great. We have the college math. This would add into that, kind of work our way in. USM's moved to a kind of a literature and composition, 2 separate pieces, so this would cover the composition part for kids moving forward. So we'd really like to look at that. I don't have a whole lot of details because it's just kind of came to it. The opportunity just came forward recently. But with our USM really wants to work with us. We have a lot of students. I think she said we're probably we have the most students currently taking advantage of early college through USM, so trying to expand. What are ways that we can expand? I've got a lot of experience with the congruent enrollment with teachers within my building being named adjunct faculty, so the kids don't have to travel and it doesn't become that schedule difficulty. So we'll start with this college writing and try to build upon that to see what we can do. And then I've thrown on, Christine did a really nice job at the last meeting, but we will have course number 3, which is pre-algebra, algebra 1, and geometry taught in CPM, which is, they're not new courses, but they're new curriculum next year at the high school. Outside of that, some of the choice classes in English, we might change the names, but the content and the graduation standards attached to them will not change. And we're not looking to remove any courses. We'll run our current courses in the course of study, and then the only reason they wouldn't run is if we didn't have students sign up for those courses to meet the class size recommendations.
Perfect.
Good stuff.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody?
Good.
Scott has a question.
Yes, Ryan, so going back to the presentation that Christine made last 2 weeks ago or something like that, she had mentioned that you and her and Drew were going to be having a meeting as far as a transition for those kids that are coming in from the middle school into the high school. Is that part of that mathematics thing that at the high school, we're looking at the 3 courses that we still were. We did have the meeting, and they're not quite the transition plan. It's primarily for the students in the middle school that were in that advanced group. How that's going to look hasn't been finalized, but we had the meeting, and we're now just meeting with teachers to make that happen. And then Christine will develop a plan to share that information out with everybody. But we've had the initial meeting on how that will look, how to make sure that we value the work that students have already done in the middle school, while also making sure that all students are prepared for the rigorous high school curriculum. Okay. Are you looking forward to the new curriculum?
Phil spent more time with it than I have, but I think that it provides a lot of what we need. When I look at the data, I see our students do much better at give me the answer to this question, and have a harder time with tell me how you got to that answer, or take these 2 parts of an answer and come up with and solve the problem. And that's how this math builds. It's based on developing not only the skills to solve the equations, but to understand how you solve the equations and apply that to another equation. So I'm really hopeful that students are going to be coming in with a better foundation in Algebra 1 that then we can build moving forward, for sure.
Excellent. Thank you.
Good. You all set? Okay, thanks very much.
Thank you.
Okay, next we have Mr. Howell. Mr. Hansen. He has an H.
Didn't trust me.
Mr. Hansen, we're ready for you
Got that, was it?
to.
And I did have to use them, so it was good. Yeah, that worked out.
Are you cold?
Okay, class.
Good evening. Great to be here. I'm Bill Hansen, Director of Facilities. So you all should have received in your packet a campus wayfinding map that's been updated to include a lot more information. And the The goal on this map will be to continue to improve it and update it to add things like hopefully walking trails and distances eventually to put on the kiosks that we have on campus that right now have nothing on them right now. And the goal was to get this in there, and I think we're getting closer to it. And we, long term, our next steps would be to have a wayfinding map for Manchester, then one for the Raymond campus. So we'd have one for all 3 locations. So that's kind of where we're headed. This one we started on first because for 911 addressing, we have been asked by Public Safety in Wyndham for quite a few years now to name our campus streets. And I actually need to do that for the DOE for the facilities report too as well. So there's a couple drivers that are part of that. So the reason we're here tonight is to talk about the proposed name changes or street names we have proposed for the campus, as well as some potentials that impacts changes in addresses for the sites. So I don't know if I don't want to take all the time to go through all the details on this, but really the main changes to the campus would be that the road that starts at 202 and down by Hope Road and travels behind the high school and ends up at Wyndham Center Road by Field Allen, that becomes Educational Way. Now, the process of getting names for roads is a little bit challenging because it has to be a name that's unique, has to be a name that hasn't already been taken, or doesn't cause confusion. So it sounded really easy to begin with, and then it got into it, found it's a little more challenging because we're also a little late to the game in getting our names selected. So that by naming that road as such, it would change the address of Wyndham Primary School. It would also change the address of the Field Allen School. Okay. So, and those would become the 911 addresses. Would be what's listed in your pamphlet on the memo. The road that's between the high school and the middle school, which is what we call the bus lane right now, kind of for us, is where the buses drop off. That becomes Expedition Way. And we have a choice on that at this point in time. It's really my recommendation that we keep the 404 Gray Road, 408 Gray Road for Wyndham Middle School and not change it to Expedition Way. It does have frontage on 202, so I think we can keep it that way. And then the potential with changes to the middle school, I think, would be less confusing, and we wait at that point in time. If there is such a thing as a new middle school in our future, that we would address it at that time with a different address. So keeping that the same. And the final change is the road that comes from that intersection of the bus lane in Educational Way. That becomes the Stadium Drive, as shown on the map. And that extends up by the stadium and then out to Wyndham Center Road. So that is really the changes that we're looking for on the campus. Those would be the names of the roads we're proposing to the board for approval. Now, the final change in address that I've also listed in there would be for the district office. Right now, the district office's address is 228 Wyndham Center Road. Our main entrance to the district office actually is on School Road. So it actually does create some confusion. People who put their GPS in can come. They try to knock on my door by my office or the one by the stairs, as opposed to turning around the corner. And you notice we put a sign that says, "Please walk around." So that's something we could consider changing as well.
One of the challenges with that is that all of our federal, state, IRS paperwork is all done as 228 as the official address of. So we're not quite sure yet to the extent that would cause issues for all sorts of filing that's been done on behalf of the RSU. So that's something to be considered.
So with that, I guess I'd open up to any board questions or concerns about the process.
No Hanson Way.
No.
You're doing all the work. You can't get yourself a roll.
In the process of looking at this, there were many name
I'm sure there were
recommendations that put together. We won't mention any of them here. It was a fun process. I want to thank the town for really working with us, because again, we're thinking about all the street names in Wyndham and some of the roads that we wanted to have. I think we were looking at Learning Way, and we contend that it was too close to a different name that was in already in the book. So it's quite a process of juggling through what we can and can't have, and they were just really great to work with to make that happen.
You don't need an official vote for this to make this happen, or do you?
I believe this is a discussion for you to review what's going on, and I believe at that the first meeting in January, you mean to vote on it.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
I'd like to discuss something, if
Okay.
I may. So we're not going to change the physical address of the middle school because there's frontage on Gray Road. Is that right?
Correct.
Okay. Here's my only issue with that. It's almost impossible to access the middle school from Gray Road. So is there any plans as far as opening up traffic? So when you turn from Gray Road, you can actually get into the middle school? Because if you turn towards the middle school from Gray Road, you have to go to the high school. It's like New Jersey. You gotta take a right.
So you're really being one of those people who read the signs that are there and follow the directions.
I think I'm the only one, to be honest with you.
I think you raise a great point. The signage there was really put up for children's safety about do not enter.
Yeah.
And I think we need to, maybe that's a great facilities committee thing to talk about signage.
Okay.
And that's really the next step for this once we're here is there's a lot of signage we need to change on campus. And really those signs need to really be purposed focusing more around when buses are present, that those roads are closed. And I don't know what the right wordage is for that right yet, but I think we really, because it says do not enter.
Right.
And I know that I don't obey by that because when I have to get someplace, I go there. Sure. Provided, obviously the buses are there, I'm not going that way. But I do think we ought to fix that because that makes it very difficult for visitors to our campus to navigate it. Because if they actually follow the signs, they are going left by the high school, and then it's really hard to get to the stadium or any place else from that.
Yeah.
If I could just chime in here for a second, though, I wouldn't suggest, though, that we spend a lot of money on traffic studies, knowing until we know what's going to happen with the current Wyndham Middle School facility, because it may be a very short-term solution that could be maybe fixed by signage, but as far as changing driveways and how traffic is routed without just if we can do it with a simple solution, fine, but if it's not a simple solution that requires a lot of construction, then
I think that we can, to be honest with you. I think that we just remove those signs that says do not enter so that you can, and make that 2-lane, because it's clearly wide enough for
People are going
3
both
dump
ways
trucks to
anyways.
drive through.
I mean, people are going both
People
ways.
do.
Yeah.
People do, but nobody. Well, apparently I'm the only one. Yeah. So I think that if we're not going to spend the money on changing the signs, I think that we really should consider changing the physical address of the middle school. I think one or the other should really happen, because to your point, as far as people typing in a GPS for 223 Wyndham Center Road and they're knocking on your door when they should be typing in, it's the same philosophy as far as I'm concerned.
Got to be consistent.
Right. So.
Yeah, I think that it would be very appropriate to just change those signs that are there. It would be very easy to do that. That would if you go to the primary school in the morning during bus drop off, there's signs, and there's a sign that comes up that says it's closed to all traffic when the buses are there. I'm not proposing that we put an electronic sign there, but that does work very well, and I think that all the general public that are coming to the school now pretty much use the other entrance. So I think it can work while the bus is there, just putting appropriate signage up. So happy to work on that as a next step.
May I make another recommendation?
Of course.
Okay. Primary school driveway 2, driveway 1. Why wasn't that considered to be just one road, one loop? Primary school.
They don't
You
connect.
can't pass through. I don't. Oh, okay. There's a gate right over there.
Yep.
Isn't there? Okay.
In primary school driveway 1, we will probably have a sign that says that on it as you're driving in, but it's not going to be a 911 address, because it is like a driveway, no different than driveway to your house, just a little bit longer than some people's. That's really what it would be. But in that way, it will be, public. We can say, please use primary school driveway 1 to access the building, and that's where the public should be coming in. And driveway 2 is really set up for the teaching staff and buses.
But in this case, it's really for the ambulance or the fire department.
Right. Yep, yep.
Right, so that's actually a driveway, it's not a drive. So when you're saying that the new address would be 24 Educational Way.
Correct.
Okay,
Yep.
all right. Cool.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Bill.
And finally, obviously, they are going to put points of interest in the 911 too. So they're going to put things we haven't listed here, like the stadium and the fields and stuff, so that if you know the 911 call is that you're on field 10, that point of interest will be in the 911, so they'll know to come down Stadium Way, and this is where that is. So that will be embedded into the system as well. So that will make things a lot better. And we are going to number the parking lots too as well. You can see those, if you look on the map, you'll see that those have all been labeled in a clockwise fashion, so that help not only for us for any issues that are out there, but people remembering where cars are. We'll actually put up some of the tags on the light poles, so you'll know what lot you're in. So
Well, that's great.
That'll help our guests, right?
yes.
Thank you, sir.
Yep.
Thank you.
Thanks, Bill.
Thank you.
Thank you, Bill.
Thanks for bringing the water.
Okay, next is the policies.
I move to approve the first reading of policy ACAA, harassment and sexual harassment of students.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Any public comment? Any board discussion?
I'm going to defer to Mr. Howell for both this one and number 2, the regulation.
Sure. So when our attorneys reviewed our policies, we didn't actually have a policy ACAA which talks about our procedure and your commitment. I would take that back. We had a policy for procedure, but we didn't have a policy of your commitment as a board to having a sexual harassment-free school campus and school environment. And as Title IX, and often people think of Title IX as just equal access for both sexes to athletics. Title IX actually has a whole component which has to do with sexual harassment and harassment of students, that just as a component that we don't talk about. So in reviewing our policies, first of all, I made a recommendation that we include not only policy ACAA, which is talking about your commitment, but then also our regulation. How is it that we're actually going to handle complaints? And I think you saw in the Google Docs, there's a lengthy complaint procedure that's there. And also for the public, on all the school websites as well as the district website, there is a harassment complaint form that if they don't feel comfortable calling someone, they can fill out digitally, and that goes to me. It also goes to the building principal for which that building was there. So really gives the community an opportunity that if there is an unsafe situation or they feel like harassment is going on or sexual harassment, for a chance for them to go ahead and report that.
Anybody have any questions? Okay, so all those in favor of this policy for the first reading?
I am.
All those opposed? Okay. Could I have a motion about?
I move to approve the first reading of policy ACAA-R, student discrimination and harassment complaint procedure.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. All those in favor? All those opposed?
I move to approve the first reading of policy ACAB-R, employee and third-party discrimination and harassment complaint procedure.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Oh, Chris?
Much like you have a commitment to making sure that you have a sexual harassment-free environment for your students, you also have the same commitment to your staff that works for you. And in our policies, we had an ACAB, which was your commitment, but we didn't have as the regulation as far as how is it that we're going to handle those complaints. And so within the policy, which will then, within the policy and then again with the regulation, once that's posted, staff will have a roadmap as far as if they're experiencing any of that in the workplace on how to go about reporting that to the district's affirmative action officer.
Any questions? All those in favor? All those opposed? Motion carries. Okay. Now, could I have a motion to accept pretty big offer from, pretty big donation.
I move to accept a Webscape Pegasus climbing net from Stephen and Karen Seymour of Raymond, Maine for installation at the Raymond Elementary Playground pursuant to 20-A MRSA subsection 12567.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Any board discussion?
Yes, I'd just like to go on record to be very clear about what we're accepting and if there are any obligations in accepting this, which is beyond generous, and that's not my point, but if there would be any encumberment from the district by accepting this.
It's actually a great question, and it's something that I'm going to be making a recommendation to policy to, because as far as how the board accept gifts is in statute, that you do have to bring it to a public meeting and you do have to vote, and once that item becomes yours, you as the district then can direct how that gift is then used, how it's installed. It becomes your piece of property. If something breaks on it and the district deems that it's unsafe, the district now is the owner and is free to then remove that item and is under no obligation to actually replace that if it so determines that that's going to be the case. But we don't have a policy. We have a Wyndham policy, in which does talk about this, and the Wyndham policy specifically, I remember correctly, talked about $2,500 or greater. Statute now for RSU requires for gifts like this for you to come and do a vote. So I would suggest for policy, if we can then go and take a look at either adopting the old Wyndham policy. Raymond didn't have one. I went through the old Raymond policy manual. But really, once it's yours, then you have the opportunity to direct how it's done. In this particular case, it will be done with Mr. Hansen as part of funds that are already being raised for upgrading the Raymond Elementary Playground, and he will also oversee the installation to make sure that it's done in a safe manner. But 5 years down the road, if the Webscape Pegasus climbing net is no longer in vogue, the RSU can remove it at its discretion and use it however it so chooses.
But also, as I read statute, this is what would be considered a conditional. It's not like somebody's giving you money and saying,
right,
you can use this however you want. This is a conditional.
That it be used for that playground.
That'll be used for this specific purpose.
In this specific playground.
Right. Okay.
Any further discussion? All those in favor? All those opposed? Motion carries. Could I have a motion? Oh, do we have anything else that anybody needs to say? Nope. Could I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor? Motion carries. We are adjourned. Thank you very much.